Hi, I'm Mark Anthony, and I'm here with my incredible co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili.
That's me.
That is you. Welcome, everyone, to The Psychic in the Doc. And we have a very special guest today, world-renowned astrologer, Kevin Casey, and he hails from Houston, Texas, where he practices his gifts of divination and tarot at Houston's oldest and most respected metaphysical bookstore, Body, Mind, and Soul. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, it's great to have you.
Thank you. It's so great. Thanks for asking me on. It's a real pleasure.
So Kevin, I got to ask you a question. You know, you grew up in Houston, right?
Memphis first and then Houston. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the Memphis. I heard the Memphis.
All right,
I heard the Memphis.
All right, so that's even better for my question. Yeah. Memphis is the heart of the Bible Belt. And I understand you were quite young when you started with your fascination in astrology. So how did that go? How did a boy from the Bible Belt turn into this famous astrologer?
Well, back in the 70s, you know, when we had the mood rings and, you know, everything was groovy, I had to sell candy for a competition, and the bag that they gave us had the zodiac signs on it. And I was so like entranced with it. I had never seen anything like that. So I sat down at my grandma's table and I said, I'm going to draw these. And she came in and she says, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm drawing these, this astrology. And she's like, oh, now, Kevin, I don't know about that. You know, because that was a big no-no. I always told people Memphis is like the buckle to the Bible Belt, you know. So later that same year, I had some drinking glasses. I saw at a store with astrology on it, signs, and my mom was like, no, I don't want to bring that into the house. So yeah, it just kind of faded, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things too that, you know, fascinates me is how we get to where we get to when we get there.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, isn't that fascinating about that? And of course, we started off kind of joking a little bit about where we are. And I wanted to call it Welcome to the Jupiter and Saturn show.
Yes.
That's kind of like the Psychic and the Doc a little bit, but right. I'm going to claim Jupiter because, you know, that's my ruling planet right there. But yeah. This is really a fascinating time for us. You know, people talk about age of Aquarius, yes. But very few people really know how science fiction this is. So let me tell you what I mean, and this is my question to you.
Yes.
Not in 400 years have we had these colossal planets. I read this and I got scared. I got myself scared. These two colossal planets, you can see them, right? Not from Seattle, because, well, maybe today, but if you live like where you can actually see the sky, you'll be able to see them. These two planets are on a collision course, but if all things goes well, they will not collide, but
Yeah.
they will get 0.1 degree, a fifth of the moon apart. That is the astronomy version of it.
Right.
But the astrology version of this is deeply seated in spirituality. It's deeply seated in energetic movement. It's deeply seated in what people are feeling, even if they do not understand those two planets. And it's deeply seated in the words that get thrown around about the age of Aquarius. What does this mean to you? Because you're the expert.
Well, what this is this truly is, we've been talking about this since the 1960s, about, the age of Aquarius with hair. But when Saturn and Jupiter connect on the 21st of December, when they conjuncted in the sign of Aquarius, this is about restrictions that we cannot abide by anymore. This is where people are going to want to throw off anything that they think is holding them back. Saturn, I'm with you. I'll take Jupiter. Saturn wants to.
We're giving Saturn a mark.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He gets Saturn.
Send him to the uncooperative chair. But Saturn will introduce fears and will say, "Oh, you can't do this." It's kind of like being at a boardroom, and Saturn wants to kind of monopolize the conversation. And
Now, wait a second. What are you trying to tell me about Saturn? I'm kidding.
Are you a Capricorn, Mark?
No, I am not.
Okay.
All right, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt her.
Oh, wait a minute, Kevin. Let's tell him about Saturn. Do you know one of the most famous paintings, right? Seriously famous painting. Some people call it the astrological painting of our time. Is Saturn devouring its children?
Yes.
Just saying, Mark.
Wow.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yes. And that right there, Dr. Pat, that right there says a lot. It was that fear that he was going to be overthrown. And so, the paranoia that came with that. But Saturn teaches us, lessons and won't let us off the hook. So when these two get together, there's going to be this, I don't want to be restricted anymore. Who are putting all these restrictions, these boundaries on me? So, we won't be able to accept that anymore. And what this does is it's setting us up for Pluto in 2024 going into Aquarius, which I feel like is really, that's when it's going to be on. And this is kind of the setup to that. Aquarius is humankind. It's the brotherhood, the sisterhood, humanitarian things. We're all one, we're all equal, those kinds of things. It's a very humanitarian sign. So this is it. Now, Pluto is in Capricorn, and we're actually in this country having a Pluto return. So, what we're having to do is all of this stuff that we've not dealt with is coming up for us, to deal with. And so Capricorn is the old way, the traditional way of doing things. And now, Aquarius is, like I say, the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That's what we're getting ready for.
Well, Kevin, in my research on this topic, I read that some astrologers believe that during 2020, and we all know that this has been a very unusual and trying, devastating, difficult year.
Yes.
Although the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn are not occurring until, not uncoincidentally, the winter solstice on December 21st. But that even though their merger isn't until then, or their conjunction isn't until then, that the fact that the two planets are heading towards conjunction has definitely had an impact on events on Earth. What's your take on that?
Oh, yeah, right. A lot of times you're right, Mark. You will start to feel as planets start to get closer to changing signs, or like you said, conjuncting. A lot of times when the actual conjunction has happened, we're already in it, like maybe, a little bit of time before. I see this in people's personal charts. So you're exactly right. I think as we're getting closer to the end of the year, we're already starting to see, some of the manifestations, here of this. So, December 21st, might not, like 2012, a lot of people were expecting fireworks. It may not be.
Well, when the conjunction, I guess, when it became apparent that this is what was happening, it seems like between March and June is when they really started on their path toward the merger, and March is when the COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemics really started going off the scale, and so it just seems, once again, I don't believe in coincidences. I mean, being a medium, I believe in synchronicity. I don't believe in coincidences. It appears that this is not the cause of what's going on, but it's actually a reflection or heralding the turmoil that this entire planet is in. And now that we're coming up to the winter solstice, okay, so we know that Jupiter is an extremely, each body in the heavens has a significance.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter's biggest planet in our solar system, Saturn's the second largest. Right. But the winter solstice, Kevin, can you explain for our listeners, what is the astrological significance of the winter solstice, which is December 21st?
What that is the sun. See, all of our astrology in the West is based somewhat on what it looks like the sun's path around the earth. And as astrologers, we know the earth revolves, around the sun.
Right, sun, right.
Right. So when it's at the summer solstice, which is the first day of Cancer, the sun is at the highest. When it's at the winter solstice, the sun is at its lowest point, there, which is also the beginning of Capricorn. And so this is the darkness with, the possibility of light. It's very interesting that in mythology, there are a lot of myths about a son or a child being born right around this time, around the winter solstice, that would later become, a savior or a light bringer. And that's really kind of what it is. It's about the birth out of the darkness into light.
Yeah.
So it's also a shift from darkness into the light. How interesting.
Yes.
that all this is going on right now.
Hey, Kevin, I want to talk about a little bit of foreplay here, if I could. My version of this is what happened this year. And people ask me about this because the people that know me understand quite a bit about, my chart, my signs. I've shared a little bit, and all you got to do is share like your birth date and stuff, and then people look you up, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, oopsie, did I really give that out? Okay. Right. So here's the thing I've come to learn. When I was really excited about Jupiter moving into Capricorn, so I'm excited about anything Jupiter, but I'm also excited about Capricorn, because if you looked at my chart, I'm splitting both of these two up in the right quadrant, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I was excited about in this year when I looked at it, but I chose not to celebrate our 10th year network anniversary. I wanted to wait till 2021 and celebrate 11. Had no idea. But when I looked at Jupiter in Capricorn, it really, the message was this, and this is what I want to ask you about, how it's going to be different now when Jupiter moves into Aquarius, because the message was, this is going to change the way we take risks. I mean, that was the big message, right? It talks about like the Jupiter Sag, we're on the luck side, optimistic, free spirit. And then of course, here comes Capricorn and all the planets I got in Capricorn. And it says, on the other hand, this is more restrained. This is about hardworking. This is about goal-oriented, steady and safe path. And I thought, I'm reading that now. And isn't that 2020 for real?
Right. No, you're right. And Jupiter is, whatever sign it's in, it's going to reward us. So for instance, if a person's got Jupiter in Capricorn, they're going to get blessings when they do more Capricorn things, like disciplined, can't skip, and you got to do things in order. If you don't do it right, you got to do it again. That kind of thing. So when Jupiter's in Capricorn, now I'll say this: Jupiter doesn't do as well in Capricorn. It's going to do better there in Aquarius.
Yeah, amen, brother, to that.
Yeah, it's going to do a lot better there. So then when Jupiter moves into Aquarius, it's going to be all things Aquarius, and I think this is going to be true with Saturn.
Yes.
Aquarius is technology, and I know for myself, Saturn went into Aquarius earlier this year for a little while. We're having to master a lot of technology. Like, I was so scared. I was like, I don't know Zoom. I don't, earlier in the year, but I had to master so many things, IGTV, all of that. And I learned it. And I see a lot of people doing that. And it's almost kind of like, if you don't do that, you're going to get left behind.
But let me ask you about that, because you're making a really good point, and that's going to set the stage for what we're about to talk about, right? If we blow by what you just said about Saturn in Aquarius in 2020, right? And we don't really see what happened. And I don't have the exact time frame, but I thought it was Marchish, right?
Yes.
I think it was Marchish, correct?
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what happened. Everything breaks down.
Yeah.
People have to change. And all of a sudden, the venue we are on now, and I don't get any money from these people, Mark, I don't think you do either, and I don't think you do. We don't get any kickbacks from our Zoom friends. But if you look back at this brief Saturn Aquarius little marriage they had, and then divorced, but they got married for a little bit this year. That's Saturn. I love you. Now I don't. But that short period of time, Zoom completely redefined its technology on a dime, right?
Yes.
Not on a year or the next Windows update, or I don't know what update, Mark, you're waiting for from where you are, but on a dime. They said, oopsie, we're not safe enough. Yes, Zoom is being crashed. And it was like in a nanosecond, in a blink of an eye, they came back with a mega platform.
Yes.
Is that what we could look forward to? Or is Jupiter going to mess that up in its big ideas?
I think Jupiter is going to expand it. The internet, the last time Saturn was in Aquarius.
Thank you.
The internet launched August 6, 1991, when Saturn was in Aquarius. So 30 years later, here we are again. And you're right. I was so amazed at how Zoom got on that. And you make a very important point. Sometimes when these, in astrology, when these planets, start doing what they're doing, you just got to go. There's no time to pack. There's no time to order. You got to go, you got to go with this. We're going from A to B now,
Like near-death experience, Mark.
It is.
Right. It's just like kind of we're doing this. And something else I want to just say very briefly is earlier in the year when we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, the last time we had that was 1982 when the AIDS epidemic started. So this is twice now in our time where Saturn and Pluto have conjuncted and we've had an epidemic.
Yep.
Pandemic started.
So in both these pandemics, both with the HIV and now with the COVID, it almost looks like a restructuring of the world order in many ways. I mean, I don't want to get political, but we look at what's happening in this country politically right now. What should be a smooth transition, and we know there will be a transition, and I'm sure it'll be peaceful and all that, but there's all this discord and tension. It's as if, the ruling house does not want to yield way, but it must eventually accept reality. So it appears that, roughly every 20 years, this conjunction occurs, but this one is particularly unusual because when Jupiter and Saturn are in conjunction, that happens about every 20 years. But on this particular one, they're especially close to each other. So do you see that as a sign of a changing world order here on Earth?
Oh, absolutely. And Mark, if you look at part of why this was really big for us, especially in the United States, I know this was a world thing, is in the US chart, we're a Cancer nation and we've got several planets in Cancer. So all this Capricorn was opposing that Cancer in our chart. And this is happening in the United States second house, which has to do with money. It has to do with what we value. So you're exactly right. I mean, because those opposition causes, that tension. So it is especially, tense.
Well, I want to get your take on this because Dr. Pat and I have discussed this on a show that we did with Nancy Evans Bush on near-death experiences, where she talked about a distressing near-death experience, a traumatic spiritual event, yet it led to something positive. So a lot of times people think in the realm of divination, which I believe that astrology falls into, that okay, so all this turmoil is happening right now, but is this necessarily in the long run something negative?
Oh, yeah, no. And that's something that's very sometimes difficult. And sometimes astrologers, I'll have to say, Mark, will kind of contribute to a lot of doom and gloom. I mean, there's been some astrologers, I'm like, oh my gosh, is there anything positive, going to happen? But no, you're right, because all it is it's basically the changing of the guards, and there's going to be a lot of turmoil. Another thing that's really interesting is, Saturn a lot of times will get us to ourselves, which is certainly what happened. So, a lot of us, I think, spent a lot more time for ourselves and we were looking at ourselves. So in the long run, it's going to be a good thing. It's just kind of, the changeover, which is going to be, tumultuous. And I like what you said, Mark, some near-death experiences, sometimes for people are traumatic, but it ends up being a gift. So I see the same thing here.
Yeah, Dr. Pat, I think you said something about that, how people who've had cancer or a heart attack said that ended up being the best thing that ever happened to them.
No, it's true. I'm not saying it's everybody, but when you hear these stories of recovery and you hear these stories of where people are now in their lives, it's true. And one of the things, Mark, you said, and I want to get back to Kevin on this, I'm not kidding about when I called December foreplay. Let me tell you why, and I really would like you to weigh in. Because one of the things we're not talking about is what's going on before the 21st. So can we just have a moment where we're going to talk about the three planets that are like having a hot old time in fiery Sagittarius right now, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun. And so we so want to get to the 21st, right? We so want to just like fast forward. Let's get to the 21st. But can we take a moment and from your perspective, talk about this? Because the bottom line with this is these two planets haven't come this close since 1623, Saturn, right? And Jupiter. Like you could make a horror movie about this, like a sci-fi movie about how they were planning to come together and all of a sudden an asteroid hits one and that 1 degree goes away. So you could have that conversation, right? But let's talk for a minute that this time leading up to that event is equally important. Can you talk about it from your perspective? Because we are talking about these other planets, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun, right?
Right. We just had that lunar eclipse, which was in Gemini, which was opposing, the sun being in Sagittarius. And that, I think, right there was very important to look at because Sagittarius is, looks toward the horizon. It's very, positive, very optimistic. It's also very philosophical, but on the darker end of things, Sagittarius can get very dogmatic about things too sometimes. Now Gemini can get lost in the details, and both signs are mutable, which means they're both adaptable and they're both changeable, and they both like to reach out to people. So what we're really kind of looking at, and I think this is really what we see going on, is our beliefs are some of us getting dogmatic about it. And I'm not talking about one or the other. There's a lot of that, going on where I see people, not talking to their family, not talking to their friends anymore. And it's all about the philosophy.
Yeah.
Which is what I see with the Sagittarius, and the Gemini, and just kind of going overboard with the Sag.
Really going overboard. But one of the things too we should also point to is, and correct me on the dates because I don't really have it all, like I'm not an astrologer. I just try to pay attention to the energies I feel and then try to make some sense out of it. But this movement out of Capricorn, this Sag movement out of Capricorn, people are feeling, how do I want to call it? It's almost like, I'm gonna make this up now. It's almost like, yeah, I'm Jupiter, and look what you did to me this year, Capricorn. You made me play lowball. You really kept me small this year. You right? I can almost hear this for a minute, right? And then saying, but wait, on the 17th of December, you are like ancient history to me because I'm going to go play with Aquarius, and everything you tried to get me not to do and successfully not to do, you can't do that anymore. I mean, more people talk about this in different ways, but from a planetary point of view, I'm wondering if that's it, because people are like, yeah, that's what you did. I mean, they're selling cups like already that says 2020 and then have a 1-star rating on it. People are already like, I'm out of here. What is the energy of this from an astrological perspective? Because I think people are smart.
Yeah, and I like what you were saying, Dr. The planets have conversations. They're like at a party, and they're having like a conversation. That's exactly what it is. You're right. I think that people are smart here, and I think it just goes back to the thing of leaving behind the things. It's like everything that was a safe or secure structure is now starting to shake, and it's starting to shift and move. And this is, part of the process, but it's very, it's very scary for people, when we're shifting. And it just goes back to the thing about us letting go of the Capricorn energy, which really wants to hold on to tradition. And then the Aquarius, which is really going to be about, the new. We see it just like with the technology, about like people having to get on board with that and not, buckle down and say, I'm not going to deal with that.
That's I always look for historical patterns and occurrences. And Dr. Pat earlier said, well, we haven't had a conjunction this close since I believe it was 1623. And what's fascinating, Kevin, what you just described about the tradition, it's bucking the change. Well, that was during Galileo's life. Right. And Galileo, and you were talking about technology. Well, he did not invent the telescope. He refined it, and he started noticing, and he followed up with Copernicus that, the sun doesn't go around the earth. We go around the sun. And oh my God, their tradition, where he lived in Renaissance Italy, was controlled by the Catholic Church, and they did not want to hear that. No. And in fact, he was excommunicated and charged with all types of things. And I think it was only a few years ago, Pope John Paul II issued a pardon. A pardon for Galileo, 400 years too late.
Okay, but wait a minute. Guess who's getting a pardon now?
Yeah, I guess, it's amazing how these astrological events keep continuing, but we try to avoid politics, so pardon me.
Yes, we do. Well,
Forget about the politics. Just look at the event. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the event and the whole conversation about pardon now, people are, and we're sitting here saying, oh, yeah, that happened 400 years ago. Why not now?
Well, yeah, and it was also a clash of the old style of thinking with a new form of technology, which is just what you were talking about with Zoom. We had Skype before, and we still do, but Zoom is changing everything. It is using technology to shake up the whole world order. Talk about the telescope. Sorry, I have to go off on a tangent. When I went to Oxford, I remember one day I was walking down the street, and I stopped, and there was this brass plaque on the wall of this building, and it said, "This is where the telescope was invented." And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like freaking out. People are just walking by, and I'm trying to tell my fellow students, and they're like, yeah, whatever. And I'm thinking, no, yeah, whatever. This changed everything. just the way the internet changed everything, the way Zoom is changing everything. And from what you're telling us, Kevin, it appears that this astrological event, it may not be changing everything, but it may be notifying us that everything is changing.
Well, yes, and you see some new social media sites coming up now. You know, Aquarius, you see this, what is it, Parlor that's now, you know, becoming a thing, Rumble, which is now becoming a thing, which is an alternative to, you know, to Twitter. You're seeing that. And
Good.
Right. You know, it is what, you know, it is what it is, I guess. But you know, you're seeing that alternative, but you also, Aquarius rules astrology. So, you know, I'm also looking, you're seeing astrology now becoming more and more. I never thought I would see this, where it's, you know, becoming a lot more mainstream.
Well, that's a fascinating point, because in the ancient world, there was very little distinction between astrology and astronomy.
Yes.
Because in the ancient world, they studied, they meaning like the Magi of Persia, the Hindus, the Chinese, the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Incas, the Hawaiians. I spent time in Hawaii, and it's amazing the ancient Hawaiian understanding of astronomy. And first they noticed the movement of the planets, and then some planets moved, or lights in the sky moved backwards, which we now know that those are planets going into retrograde.
Right.
But the distinction between astronomy and astrology, there really wasn't one until we got to the era of Galileo. And now what you're describing, Kevin, is it looks like we're going back to a merging of the disciplines. Could you elaborate more on that?
Right. No, you're exactly right, because the two were together, like you said, and then they began to, you know, split in the age of reason, you know, where intellect became everything there. So now we're going to see, again, what it is that I tell people, you know, astronomy is a science. Astrology is a very poetic or mythological way of describing your life or what's going on. And, you know, I tell people the planets aren't actually making things happen, but what they're doing is they're reflecting to us what's going on. So it's kind of like one of those Rorschach ink blot tests. You know, when you look and you see where everything is, it reads, you know, you learn like, oh, Jupiter means this, Saturn means this. And it's just giving you as above, so below, you know, is what it is. It's just telling you, reflecting what's going on Earth. So I think just people just kind of having this shift there about it, and that it's not, you know, or, you know, whatever else we might have learned when we were younger, you know. But that's the way that I see it. It's the way that I, you know, explain it to people. And people just seem to be a lot more open to, especially the younger generation. And social media, my God, I mean, has really, you know, promoted, you know, astrology to real.
Yeah. Look, I do want to talk politics for a minute, but not politics really.
Right.
So when they had the big debates, and we were like, seemed like eons ago, when everybody was up on the stage and we didn't know who was going to be the who or the what, my friend asked me a question and said, well, who do you think's going to be the pick for this? And then who do you think's going to be the vice president? And I said, without blinking, Kamala Harris. And they said, why? Saturn return in Aquarius, and take a look at her chart and look at her first Saturn return. Take a look at what she stands for and when she was born. And then take a look at Biden for a minute. And my friend said, you're nuts. How would you even be talking about this? And how do you know that? Well, I said, I went to school in California for 10 years. Hello. I mean, you know, if you're in school for anything in California for 10 years, you at least mispronounce her name, right? Number one. So you don't even call her by her first name because you can't pronounce it or you don't know it. And you just call her Harris. But this is an interesting, when we look at people for a moment and then fast forward to the 21st. It's not just astrology anymore. It's daunting if you look at a Kamala Harris's chart, so to speak, and you look at the transit and you look at what's happening now. Saturn in Aquarius, because Saturn in Aquarius, what? The California riots. Where was she? 92, 90, she got her bar. So isn't this another layer of the dynamic of the planets moving? And by the way, these aren't the only two planets in the astrology charts. I just want to say there's a whole lot of other planets that are like equally powerful, but for the moment, they're, you know, whenever you're talking about these two, everybody takes a back seat.
Well, these are our current superstars.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was going to say that Saturn, even when I'm looking, one of the first things I learned as when I was first starting to study astrology was to really focus on Jupiter and Saturn, because Jupiter is in a sign for a year, Saturn is 2.5 years. So usually those things are more relatable to people. Right. What's going on, as opposed to, you know, like Neptune and Pluto, which can be like 15 years in a sign. So I learned very quickly to kind of grab a hold of those, because they're very telling of what's, you know, going on within a year or so. The other thing I was going to say, you know, what I have here is that Kamala is a, you know, she's a Libra. She's got a Gemini ascendant. Mine's got Sagittarius ascendant, according to the chart. So, you know, she's right there on she's on his 7th house. I mean, Gemini's on his 7th house. So it's just like a perfect, you know, it's like a perfect match. And she's got a moon in Aries. So all of these things in Capricorn too were really stirring up things, you know, in her chart. It's interesting because Joe's got all of the Scorpio. So, you know, he's going to be, I just kind of feel like she's going to probably be a little bit more, I feel, maybe upfront than maybe we've seen with other vice presidents, just simply because, you know, she just has a more, maybe that won't be true, but I just kind of, that's how I kind of see it in my head.
Well, I hope it is true. I have a friend that started a petition, and I don't know how far this petition got, but he made an assessment of what happened to Kamala Harris after the nomination, right after Joe says, oh yeah. So he started this petition. I don't know under whether, but he started a petition to release the gag order on Kamala Harris. And I thought, you're right. I mean, she hasn't been gagged really, but where did she go?
Mm-hmm.
Is this an energy that we have to be worried about? Because if a woman like Kamala Harris, people are saying, where did you go? How many people moving forward under this energy are going to be asked, where did you go?
Right. Well, I'll tell you one thing that I really look at, besides just her dynamic chart, is in numbers. I just want to talk about that quickly. In numerology, the number 1 is associated with the sun and it's masculine, and number 2 is associated with the moon and the feminine. So when we moved into the year 2000, that's a big deal, because the years are now leading with the feminine. All the years before began with 1, which was the masculine. So now we're leading with the 2. And that's another big switchover that I see that we've been going through for 20 years, where now the feminine is going to be leading. And it's like, you know, that feminine energy, which is, you know, it's energy, you know, intuition. So we're going to be seeing more and more. I've known for quite some time women taking, you know, leadership roles, stepping into the spotlight.
You know, it's fascinating. In one of his last interviews back in the 1920s, Nikola Tesla said that the 21st century would see the emergence of the feminine as the dominant gender. And, you know, he was so far, he was obviously very odd in a lot of ways, but also very far seeing. I understand they modeled the character of Sheldon in Big Bang Theory after Nikola Tesla, because now Sheldon's always knocking like, Leonard, you know, knocking on the door 3 times. Tesla wouldn't enter a building until he walked around it 3 times. And he'd only stay in a hotel room if the room's number was divisible by 3. But for whatever reason, Tesla felt that it was time in the 21st century, or he had some understanding that the feminine gender would become the dominant. And on behalf of our gender, Kevin, we have done such a violent job in the last 5,000 years. I'm willing to give women a go.
Hand it over. Right.
Yeah.
No, it's time. And no, that's exactly it. I didn't know that Tesla said that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's, you know, he said so many, you know, people thought he was a kook and a nut and all that, but then again, it's the kooks and the nuts that seem to make the history books.
And if you notice, I don't know, Dr. Pat, whether you've noticed this or Mark too, the moon is so big right now.
It's
There's
gigantic.
Yeah, the moon, moon phases, moon rituals. I mean, all of that is so big right now, which is, I love it,
Yeah, I love it too. And here's my question for you. I know we've got a few minutes left. When you look at all of this going on right now, I would love for you to know, what are your top 5 things? If people were to think about this and want to really explore more, when you're looking at where we are now and what you're seeing in this movement on the 21st and then after, right? What are the top 5 things or top 3 things that if I was in Kevin's head, I would want to know?
I like that. Number 1, I would say that community, because, and I know this is kind of strange right now because we're all, on lockdown, but Aquarius, is communal. And, in 2026, Uranus is going to go into Gemini. So I would see, and then Pluto and Aquarius in 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see people kind of coming together and living together kind of like in communities. Is one of the things that I could possibly see happening, because we simply need, to kind of lean on each other, more there also. The second thing, like I talked about too, I think that we're going to see a big shift in finances, the financial sector. The last time Uranus was in Taurus, we were in the Depression. So, with everything that's going on with the United States chart with Pluto in the 2nd house, we're probably going to see some financial structures. I thought it might be Bitcoin or maybe some other things that come up. There might be some more programs that come up. I know people don't want to talk about the S word, socialism, but you might see that, Dr. Pat, more things like socialized medicine, that kind of thing there for sure. And then just, really kind of getting on board with the technology. And the other thing I want to say too, with Neptune and Pisces, we're becoming a lot more sensitive to what's going on around us. And I think what really freaked some people out during COVID is they were really getting in touch with themselves. They found out they were really creative. They were, intuitive, and we're coming up with all of these ideas. So I would say, don't be afraid of, like what's coming up for you. So, get ready, because you're going to be a lot more sensitive to what's going on. And I would also say with that, being careful about who you're around. And what I mean by that are people who are negative and are always cynical. It's going to start affecting us a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I just ran my solar return. Of course, I have no idea how to interpret it, but I'm always curious, right, about what it looks like. And I was really interested in how everything moved from the 3rd quadrant to the 4th quadrant. And I'm still trying to take it all in. But it's fascinating as each of us looks ahead and not puts all of our money in the basket, but we look at astrology for a particular reason. Kevin, what is that reason from your perspective?
To me, it's just another way to understand what's going on. It's like I said, like I was telling Mark, it's like a poetic way of describing life, and it gives us something. When I discovered astrology, it helped me understand myself a lot more. It helped me understand people a lot more. And it just helped me understand kind of, what do I need to focus on this year? I don't need to think, when they say, well, 5 years from now, where will you be? Astrology really helped me say, focus right here, and that the planets go in cycles. So if you're in a cycle that's very difficult, it's not forever. You're going to cycle out of it. And that, something that was really huge for me. It's like, okay, this is what's going on now. It's not going to be forever.
Yeah. And I want to make sure people know how they can get a hold of you and work with you, because there is really an issue if you let's say you get a solar return chart like I did, and let's say you don't know much about this, right? And you read a line on here that says, charts with little or no error can also indicate a little forethought. So that's on my chart. But they don't tell you that I have spent an entire year this year in Capricorn with a lot of thought and a lot
Yeah.
of planning and a lot of getting ready. And if you don't work with somebody, you're going to walk away from that and think, whoa, what the heck does that mean? How do they find out about you? How do they work with you?
Sure. I'm here in Houston, Texas. I'm at the store Body, Mind, and Soul, and our website is bmshouston.com. And just go and you can find me there under Intuitive Readers. I read here on Tuesdays and Fridays and the second and fourth Saturday of every month. It'll give my schedule there. So bmshouston.com. And you're right, Dr. Pat, a lot of times it's great that we've got the technology and the printouts, but the printouts can't synthesize that information. Sometimes, I've had people come to me and just go like, Kevin, I don't even want to do this next year. And you look at it, I said, I know they're not able. It's great that they can, they've come a long way, but they still can't synthesize the information. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a statement like that, which is alluding to the fact that I have no air in my chart moving forward,
Right.
but the fact that my ruling planet is like hanging out with Aquarius, we don't make these interpretations. Mark, what is your question here in bringing this together for Kevin?
Kevin, what is your astrological outlook on 2021?
2020. Okay. Like I said, the first thing that we're going to see, just kind of, going back, since we're going to have Jupiter actually is going to go into Pisces for a little while. It's going to kind of go through Aquarius pretty quickly, but then it'll retrograde back. So, like I said, that's going to be all of the Aquarian type stuff. This is paving the way for Pluto here, which is going to be very big. I would also say there's a good chance we're going to see still uprisings because Aquarius is a very, protest oriented, sign there. So we're probably going to see those things. And like I said, also, actually, the eclipses that we're going to have this coming year, we're going to have 4, they're going to be in Sagittarius and Gemini. We have 1 in Taurus. So it's just like what Pat was talking about with the Sagittarius energy and the Gemini energy. We're really, we're going to be finishing up this thing about our, beliefs and trying to be open to other people's. How can we work out this difference? How can we do this? I think it's going to be really, really big in 2021 because right now we're just still so polarized right now. I think 2021 is going to be, hey, people are going to start reaching across the aisle and say, hey, how can we start trying to understand one another? I think that's going to be big in 2021.
Well, thank you, Kevin. That's an inspirational and uplifting message. And,
Yes.
I think everybody right now needs a message of hope. And I'm glad to hear from you that it's written in the stars.
Yeah, boy.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to it. Like a principal told my 2 sisters one year, you girls need to stop throwing those cherry bombs in the toilet. Thank you so much for tuning us in and turning us on. Kevin, thank you so much. Mark, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have you back, and I'm going to have to call you to help me interpret my solar return.
Oh, yes.
There we go. Thank you, guys. Everybody stay tuned. We got another hour coming up.